Dr. Brad O'Connor, Florida Realtors economist. Brad?
I'm Brad O'Connor, Director of Economic Research. I work with John at Florida Realtors. All right, so we've had a great overview of what's going on, especially in the employment sectors of our economy from Jesse earlier, and then Ted gave an excellent overview of what's going on nationally in many different areas. We'll tie both of the concepts and information from both of those together, and look specifically at our real estate markets here in Florida, and what's been happening over the past year or two, and where we think it's going to go from here. These are easy to follow indicators, essentially, that you can follow in the newspaper. I mean, they're going to basically tell you what's going to happen with the market. The first one is population growth. As an economist, we talk about demand and supply a lot. If you were to actually ask an economist what they define demand is essentially how much people are willing to pay for different levels of services, or how many goods are you willing to buy for different prices. Population is essentially your demand for housing. More people means more demand for housing. You'll notice that blue line right there is the population of Florida beginning in 1970. We've more than tripled our population since the late 60s. But what you'll notice is that when we had the economic breakdown in the past decade, there's a little kink in that line, and we're not growing as fast as we used to. We were accustomed to a very high rate of growth, well over 2%, even closer to 3% per year, and that's actually not been happening. What I've done is graphed under this line the growth rate in the green bars. And what you see is that we dropped almost to zero. We almost lost population for the first time in pretty much ever. But what we're seeing here is a little bit more steadily increasing growth back towards what we're accustomed to. We're still only barely over 1%, but the good news is those growth rates are starting to move up again. We have always depended as an economy on people moving to Florida and putting pressure in our housing market to keep prices elevated. Now, as far as where we're growing, this is a graph of since the economic meltdown to present of percent change in population in each county in the state. And where you really see growth is a variety of places. I put the top 10 counties up there, and there's not a lot in common with all of them. A lot of them are retirement destinations. The Villages in Sumter County would be the number one. I would point to there. I mean, they're blowing everybody else away in terms of population growth. But the rest of them are actually pretty nice population growth as well. It's just they look smaller compared to Sumter. But again, you've got some beach areas outside of the larger metro areas, St. Johns County and St. Augustine. You've got Osceola County south of Orlando. So a lot of spillover from the cities into the surrounding counties and whatnot. But there's really no specific type of county that is growing and one that isn't. Looking at in-migration from other states and territories, because that's how we normally grow. I mean, obviously, like every other state, we have births and deaths, but we also bring in a lot of our population from outside. I think only maybe 30% of people living in Florida are actually born here. Where we're bringing in people from, mostly the more populous states, obviously, but New York seems to be the top right now. This is over the past 5 years. New York and Georgia predominantly, followed by Texas. Most of these are retirees. Now, retirees were the first part of the market to recover, the luxury market and the retiree market, and the reason being is that the stock market rebounded before everything else. Pensions were stabilized again. But what this graph masks is that, yes, we're growing, but we're also losing population to other states. So while we have a lot of people coming in, we also have a lot of people leaving. In fact, they're going back to some of those same states, mostly because those are large states, so you're going to have a lot of traffic in between them. But we are losing, over the last 5 years, we've lost 217,000 people to Georgia, and that's predominantly going right to Atlanta. We're losing people to Houston, Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, New York City, and Seattle. We're losing a lot of our younger population to some of these states because they've got growing tech sectors and whatnot.
we've had a little bit of brain drain in Florida, so we're bringing in all the retirees. We've got excellent universities, but we're not keeping all of our young, bright students. What we really need to focus on, and I think Jesse convinced me that that's being focused on a lot in Tallahassee, is ways to bring in more industries that are going to employ these people, more STEM industries, science and technology industries. What I've done finally here is actually mix those last two slides together so you can see the net population change, or the net population migration. So we're netting over 100,000 people from New York and also the Rust Belt states, but we're still losing population to other southern states, such as Texas and Georgia and South Carolina and North Carolina. We have reason to be optimistic, but it's something we have to keep our eye on, because part of demand is how much are you willing to pay for something. The other part is, well, how much are you able to pay for something? So if you don't have a job, it's kind of difficult to pay for that new house. Regarding employment, what we've done here, this is our sandwich graph. We take every sector in the Florida economy, job sector, and we stack them over time. So as different layers get thicker and thinner over time from left to right, that's just how much that particular sector changes. We've got a pretty balanced economy in Florida, especially given the size of our leisure and hospitality industry. And if you look along the top line, that's basically what our employment is doing. So Jesse showed you a graph from the very bottom, 2010 going up. Well, before that, we had a lot more jobs, and that wasn't on that graph. But we're almost back to where we were. First, right in the middle there, you've got private health, the health services. That's basically our healthcare industry. That is the only industry that grew continuously through the economic downturn. Next, these are 3 different sectors that actually fell but have pretty much recovered and in fact are trending much better than before. You've got leisure and hospitality, professional and business services, which includes attorneys, scientists, temp agencies, all kinds of different office agencies. And of course trade. Trade's going to include retail, wholesale trade, transportation, and utilities. That's the biggest part, that's the biggest chunk of our economy, and it's doing great. I mean, Ted mentioned how retail is coming. And finally, what's not growing, or what's barely growing at all, would be the other 4 sectors I have in here. Government, information, which is not information technology, that is news services, and radio and television. Obviously, we've all heard about the plight our newspapers are in and whatnot, so that you see, again, a decline in that sector. This is a bubble chart. Different sizes of circles represent the size of that sector. What you want to focus on is how far left to right each bubble is. So don't ignore how high or low it is. Just left to right, that's how much that industry has changed as a percentage since 2007, when we really started to feel the downturn. So construction hit the hardest, biggest fall. Private health, as we talked about already, it kept growing, like it was oblivious. I guess people just didn't stop getting sick or something. Now, if you go up or down, that is what has happened since 2011. So how high or low you are on the chart means how well you're recovering, essentially. The higher you are, the faster you're recovering. So again, we've got most of our guys above, even though we had a lot of guys below water in terms of the overall change, we've got a lot of guys on the right track. Third economic indicator of importance around Florida would be the stock market. Now, normally that doesn't affect, your market nearly as much as, it doesn't directly affect your market as much as, say, employment or population. But in the case of retirees who have pensions, in the case of the luxury market, the stock market is synonymous with your wealth. And so if you're in an area where you've got a sizable retiree population or luxury market, then that's, it's even more important for you to follow what's going on there. Closed sales went up again last year. Not by as much as the year before. In fact, the most common question I was asked the prior year was, are we in another bubble? In 2013, did it feel like we might be in another bubble? We had no inventory. We had ridiculous amounts of sales coming out compared to what we had previously seen. And prices were ramping up by 16, 17, 18% in a lot of areas in the state. My analogy at the time was, no, what happened is when we hit the downturn, we drove off the road and then we just simply overcorrected. Following the crash, there was so much uncertainty about what's going on. Uncertainty dampens things. It dampens prices. It dampens decisions. It dampens sales.
Maybe that's not because the market's supposed to be there, but we don't know where the market's supposed to be, so we're conservative with our money. Once we kind of had a handle, in 2013 that, hey, I think things are going to get better, I think the market just recorrected and returned to where it was supposed to be all along. You'll notice the top chart is closed sales. The bottom chart is new listings. So for the first time in the last couple of years, we've actually got new listings going up along with closed sales. And that's another story from 2014 that we can take away, is that we actually had new listings outpacing sales finally. Those high prices in 2013 encouraged more people to come onto the market with their homes, brought inventory up enough to get us back into balance. The top chart and bottom chart should mirror each other closely, being that the top chart is inventory for the state of single-family homes, and the bottom chart is month supply of inventory. Our month supply of inventory has returned to a steady amount between 5 and 6 months supply, which is, historically what we say is a balanced market. Third story from 2013 or 2014 is that the price increase, which I just alluded to. It was a very rapid price increase in 2013. We didn't see it as great a price increase last year. Essentially being the fact that, again, we were doing that correction thing, right? What we've done really is return to kind of a historical 4 or 5% growth rate in prices, which is where we should, we've historically been. So we did not have a bubble, we just had a return to sanity, essentially. Or this kind of illustrates that concept. What the blue line is our Florida Realtors price index. It's actually an outdated slide, I need to add 2014. But what it shows is our price index for housing. The indexes both start at 100, the other index being the consumer price index for everything but shelter, which is everything having to do with housing. So the blue line measures the value of homes in Florida, where in the year and it compares everything to the year 2000. So if we were at 230 in 2006, that means that we were 130% greater value than we were in 2000, or 130% higher prices. The green line being inflation for everything else in the economy, from toilet paper to newspapers to cable to anything else in the economy, that's measured by the green line. So you'll notice that maybe we were charging a little too much for our homes for a little while there. And then maybe we overcorrected just a little. But as of 2013, we were creeping back to the green line, and that's actually where we've kind of stopped, and we're growing right along with that green line again. Investor participation is starting to decline slightly. Now, every time I say investor participation is starting to decline, everyone says, oh my gosh, all the investors left. Not quite. Rents are still high. The red bars are rent measured by the Census Bureau. The blue line is our price index again. Not directly comparable, apples and oranges, but essentially it shows you the pattern. As house prices have gone down, rent has gone up for many different reasons. That means that a lot of these investment properties remain attractive to rent out. Some at the higher end may not be as attractive as before, and some of these larger institutional investors may be willing to dump some of these higher end properties. Maybe they're not making the return on those, but we have buyers for those, it looks like, in the economy, because prices are still, level or going up. These are charts of new listings, closed sales, and inventory by price tier. So what we're seeing is inventory increase on the upper end and decrease on the lower end as an end result. And this is predominantly because of investor activity. They've really bought out the low end of our properties, our lower tier. Monthly cash sales is percentage of closed sales. Now, we've been using cash sales all along as a proxy for investor activity. We've always had, in Florida, a fairly high number of cash sales simply because we have retirees cashing out their paid-off mortgages from their old home, or we have a sizable luxury market where people can afford to pay cash. But we've never seen this, or at least not in quite some time, where the single-family percent paid in cash jumped from 20% in 2008 to between 40 and 50% for several years. But what we've seen again
is it's slightly decreased. That doesn't mean they're all going to jump out. They've all got different things to consider depending on the value of the homes they've purchased and how, what their own unique business situation is. We just think it's going to slowly taper off. Orange County is seeing one of the highest activities in terms of building permits in the last 5 years. Sumter County is the highest. In terms of single-family homes, no county has permitted more single-family homes in the last 5 years than Sumter County. Again, the villages is just ridiculous how fast they're growing. Sumter County is followed by Orange County and Hillsborough County, who are two larger counties in this state. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're not as famous as Sumter, but they're fairly large. And again, Pinellas County, Broward County, sorry, but you're out of room for single-family homes. In terms of multifamily units, Miami's owning that right now. We've got all these high-rises coming up, for one thing, downtown. Orlando and Tampa have seen significant investment into multifamily, especially towards the cores as well. When you add up all the dwelling units together, so adding multifamily units to single-family units, first place is Orange County, or is it, no, it might be Hillsborough, I can't remember and I can't read it. They're close. Hillsborough, okay, I'll take your word for it. And then followed by Miami and then Sumter and other areas of the Miami metro. So what you see there, along the I-4 corridor, there's a lot of building going on. In Southwest Florida, there's a decent amount of building. And then in Southeast Florida, you've got some multifamily coming up. The rest of the state, not as active in terms of construction. Part of that being higher construction prices. Where our workers go, they're not coming back. And if they are, they're probably going to get paid a little more. Finally, international sales, which is, again, a topic of interest to a lot of you, which is great because we still haven't figured out a great way to get international sales data. What we're using here is NAR's figures from their survey of the state. This shows, essentially, of all international buyers in the state, what percentage of those buyers were active in the different metro areas. So this isn't, 11% for Orlando doesn't mean that 11% of Orlando sales were foreign buyers. What it means is 11% of the state's foreign buyers bought in Orlando. What you see there, and again, these numbers are a little off because it's a survey, and we think that the Polk County number of 0.5% might be a little low given their historical ties to the UK and how many UK buyers build there or buy there. But essentially what you see is the I-4 corridor, the South Florida metro area, and then Southwest Florida especially. Those numbers are very high for Southwest Florida, 8% and 7% of the states, and 7% again of the states of foreign buyers, and yet those have much smaller populations, those counties, than some of the red ones. So that's actually a higher proportion of their buyers. Shadow inventory continues to decline. At Florida Realtors, we make up our own shadow inventory report. We take CoreLogic data for loans that are distressed or in foreclosure, and we subtract from that all of the MLS listings in the state that are flagged as foreclosure or REO. What you're left with is everything that is not on the MLS that is potentially in big trouble. Estimated Florida shadow inventory, though, what we've seen is this shadow inventory is declining like gangbusters. I mean, it's not going that fast. One thing we're probably all sick of is opening the paper and seeing Realty Track says, Florida leads nation in foreclosures. It's a headline automatically every single month they release the report. Florida leads in foreclosures. Yes, we're a judicial foreclosure state. It takes us longer to process them. We had a lot more than anyone. I think we're all well aware of that. We're getting rid of them. We're just kind of taking our time, but we're doing it. We're going in the right direction. We have not, been upticking or anything. An interesting thing about the market, too, is that short sales have disappeared, at least in the MLS from what we're seeing. Foreclosures have actually taken over a lot of the bandwidth as far as our distressed sales. That top chart is a percentage chart for each month, I think beginning in 2010, of the share of sales that were either orange, which are traditional, green, which are foreclosure or REO, or blue, which are short sales. And these are completed sales. And as you see, not only has the percentage of sales that are distressed shrunk, as we've had a lot more traditional homes come onto the market, but the share of those distressed sales that are foreclosures or REOs versus short sales has really changed a lot.
And again, we think that's just the banks becoming a lot more familiar with the system. I think we've just gotten into the flow of everything in terms of that. So we're slowly getting rid of these distressed loans, but it's going to take a long time to completely get rid of them. Our forecast, well, we're going to pretty much stick with our guns and look at what's happened this year, and we don't see any significant changes. We don't see those interest rates going up too much. We don't see much happening in Washington at all, as Ted suggested. I would tend to agree with that. I don't expect pretty much anything to happen there. So we just see things continuing on as they are. About 10% growth in home sales, 4 to 5% growth in home values. The reported home values might even be higher than that because we're exhausting our lower end inventory, so it's just higher quality or better located homes that are selling, which inflates the median price more than the actual value of homes is increasing. But that's what we see happening.